It's Wednesday, October the 28th. This is my third try with this video. YouTube is being something special today. Yay! So this is going to be my Samhain video. Saturday, of course, is Halloween, as many people know it. It is also known as Samhain for many people. And Samhain is more of the spiritual aspect of the holiday. Halloween is more of the secular aspect and what we've come to really recognize more than anything else. Halloween, of course, is the time when we wear our costumes and we go door to door taking candy from poor strangers who are expected to shell out the good stuff for fear of egg and toilet paper retribution, which nobody wants. So, buy the big candy bars, mom and dad, buy the big candy bars. The kids like that. Don't buy the raisins, and nobody wants toothbrushes. Nobody wants toothbrushes. Um, I don't buy the big bars, but I do buy the name brand candy. I make sure that my kids are well taken care of. I don't want to have to try and clean egg off of slate tile house. I also put toys in my basket for kids who maybe can't have candy. So I try to make sure that there's erasers and pencils and rings and games and things in the basket too. Um, so for Samhain, Samhain, of course, is the word that a lot of people who aren't familiar with this particular holiday, Samhain is the word that looks like it's spelled Samhain. It's actually Samhain or Samhain. It is a Celtic word, an Irish word, I believe, actually, that the best to my understanding, it just stands for beginning of winter, which is what this holiday is. This is the last harvest holiday. This is the beginning of the winter season. Samhain is, through folklore, what it's understood is that anything that hasn't been harvested by Samhain gets left, so that the animals and the spirits have things to eat throughout the winter. So you're providing for nature when you leave the last of the harvests out there. So this is a time of thankfulness, but this is also a time when we recognize that we are coming into the dark season. We've noticed already that we've passed the equinox, so our evenings are getting to be longer. The dark is getting to be longer than the light. It is also a time when we say that the veil is thin. And the veil that we're referring to is the veil between the living and the non-living, the spirit world. And the veil is thin twice a year. It's thin during Beltane, when fertility is big, and that's during the May Day season. Fertility is a big thing, so babies are constantly being brought into the beginning of creation. So spirits are looking for homes, essentially. They're looking for babies to come to so that babies can have souls. And remember, this is all based on more of a pagan belief. This is not Christian belief. So this may not jive with what you were raised with or how you identify. And this is part of mythologies. So Beltane then is the time of recognizing the living, the light, the fertility. So Samhain then is the recognition of the ancestors. It's the time of the beginning of the dark. It's the time of passing. And remember, death in and of itself, death is not a bad thing. The death of something simply means that we are making room for something new. Think of death like taking out, I don't want to say taking out the garbage, but you're removing things and people and ideas that make room for new things and people and ideas. It's a recycling project. Death is part of that recycling project, just like birth is part of that recycling project. So at this time of the year, then, we honor ancestors, and we honor ancestors because they are so very, very close to us during this time due to the thin veil. So some of the things that happen during this time of the year that we're familiar with is we're familiar with costumes and masks. Costumes and masks are done for one of two reasons. They're either done to emulate the spirits and the animals and those who have gone before us, or they are done to protect us from spirits. So we put on these crazy clothes and makeup and masks and cover ourselves so that we're unidentifiable. A few of the rituals that Dan and I like to do is we like to do something called the ancestor stick. And the ancestor stick is when we take a stick, it's branched probably about 2 feet long, and usually has a fork or two on it, and we introduce it to a group of people. And what we do is everyone gets a chance, many chances actually, to tell stories. And every time you tell a story about your ancestry, you get to tie on a piece of ribbon or string or some little tchotchke, so that by the time the storytelling is all done, you have this beautifully decorated stick. And then what we do is we usually hang it, and then the next year at Samhain we pull it back out again and we reintroduce it and tell more stories and tie more strings, and over the years it gets to be pretty covered. I know I've mentioned ancestor sticks in other videos before, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail than that. The other thing that Dan and I like to do is something called Dumb Supper or Silent Supper. And this is a themed and intentional meal. So all of your food, all of your table settings, all of your apparel, everything is done in the colors of red, black, and white. And that represents the blood of the ancestors, the earth that we walk on, and the white for the spirit that is in all of us. So we would do foods like maybe chicken dishes, or we would do beef dishes, so that you'd have either the white or the black, because in candlelight they look white or black. We do tomato dishes, cream-based dishes, red wine or grape juice, black coffee, milk. We would serve all of these kinds of things. And so then what you would do is you would set your table, and you would set it with candles. You do this by candlelight. There's no music, there's no talking, there's very little noise. And the reason for this, the reason for the lack of communication between the living observers of this particular ritual, is because your focus is supposed to be on the remembrance and honoring of the ancestors, and your chatter gets in the way. So you do this in silence, and you do this with reverence. It would be like church. So when you set your table, you set a spot, of course, for all of the living guests, but you set at least one spot for the ancestors as well. And when Dan and I do it, we would set 2 spots, one for his ancestors and one for mine. But when we do it in a group setting, we set just one spot for the ancestors. You serve the ancestors first. They get served the same food that everybody else does. When we would do this in a group, we would have everybody bring little mementos and pictures and things to place around the ancestor setting. And then we'd have a big bouquet of flowers in the center of the table, and everybody would take a flower to represent their ancestors. And we would fill a little vase by the ancestor spot. So then we would have our meal, and when we finished with our meal, we'd find a tree outside, and we'd offer up the ancestor's plate to the spirits and the animals outside. And then we would each take our little flower and get into our cars, and we'd go off to a body of water somewhere, and we'd release these flowers. And as we release these flowers, we're actually saying, goodbye for another year. You're still close to us in our hearts, but it's time to go back to mundane life again. And then after we've all released our flowers, then we're released to speak again. So the last thing I'd like to do with this video, if I can keep it from cutting off before I'm done again, is I would like to honor my ancestors that I would usually honor at our silent supper. I honor ancestors that are recent ancestors, that are close ancestors. People that I have known or should have known recently, like in my lifetime. So the first ancestor is my grandmother. I'd like to recognize my grandmother Dorothy. And I know I talk about her pretty frequently. She was very close to me. She and I were very close. She helped my dad to raise me. She and my grandfather did. And she took real good care of me and kept an eye out for me and taught me a lot about how to live. So I like to honor my grandmother. I like to honor my grandfather Joseph, who also kept a real close eye on me and made sure that this teenage girl had everything she needed going through school, whether it was a ride somewhere or a pocket knife or $20 in my pocket. He always made sure I had what I needed. I'd like to honor my cousins Joe and David. David died a few years before I was born, and he would have been just a couple years older than me, so he died as an infant. And Joe just died in the last year or so of cancer. I'd like to honor my mother-in-law, Sue. Sue was an amazing quilter, an amazing crafter. Loved her family, and you could tell that, you know, through the work that she did for them, in gifts and meals, and just the way she took care of her family. I'd like to honor Marilyn. Marilyn was like another grandmother to me. She was spitfire and sass and a little old ball of woman, and she passed last year in the spring, and she was a very dear friend of mine. I'd like to honor Gwen. Gwen was the mother of a very good friend of mine. And Gwen had such kindness and love for everyone in her life, for her family, for her friends, and you could see this even through to the end of her life, even through you know, the very debilitating illness that she had. You could still see the love and kindness that she had for everyone. I'd like to honor Jason, who was the first person that I had ever attended a funeral for. He was a very close friend of mine in college, who through intoxication and driving managed to kill himself, and it was a very hard thing for me to understand. And of course, I'd like to honor 5 kitties. I'd like to honor Misty and Harley and Midnight and Mamie and Simba, who we recently lost. And these 5 kitties are, they were all exciting little balls of fur, and they each had their own beautiful little personalities, and we miss them. So I would like for you all to take a moment during this upcoming weekend, through all of your parties and makeup and festivities, to just stop and remember where you come from, and to say thank you to them, because at this time of the year, they're listening. They hear you. They're close. You know, send love to the ones you knew, and send honor and respect to the ones you didn't. So many blessings to all of you. Blessed be, blessed Samhain, and I will see you all next week. Thank you.